welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. It is a good day to talk about home loans. I'm very, very excited. It is Saturday morning. I just got out of a meeting and I'm ready to talk about home loans. More specifically, I am part of a new loan officer group on Facebook, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of go through there. Obviously, I'm not a new loan officer, or maybe I am. If you think being in the industry only for a couple of years is new, that's completely fine. But today's podcast is a solo podcast. It is just me, and I thought it would be interesting to jump on here, take a look at what some of these new loan officers are going through. So it's really interesting. Obviously, this is, maybe not the podcast for everybody, but, I kind of want to start it, the beginning of becoming a loan officer and why is a group like this even exists, right? You would think that if you become licensed that you're ready to do your job, right? That's not the case. And, this is maybe closer to the equivalent of getting a degree or getting some sort of certificate or whatever, some sort of certification. You don't always have practical knowledge base, and because you haven't done it. And so maybe some of you do understand, but essentially, the getting your license for a loan officer is very similar to getting your license as a realtor. You go through a course, you do mandated hours, you do it on mandated sections. After you pass that course, then you go and you submit your paperwork, you get your background check, you do all of that, you get approved to take your exam. Or actually maybe for the loan, it was reversed. Actually, it's reversed. So you take the exam, once you pass, then you do the rest of that stuff. But essentially, you take your exam. If you pass your exam, congratulations, you have passed. And now you just have to get put in under a brokerage, get all of your stuff, get all your stuff on there, and then you're good to go. So what ends up happening is you pass the exam, you're very excited, and you're ready to move into the industry, and you kind of run into this roadblock. The first thing is you don't have experience with being a loan officer, so it can be really daunting to do that. Now, for me, I actually was not a loan officer to start. I actually was in a very lucky position to where I was considered like a processor. And what that really is, it's a glorified paper collector. And while you're collecting all of these papers, you're learning how to do the job. And that's originally why I got brought on, right? I was doing real estate. I was doing the real estate media. And this was during the height of the refinance boom, as well as a lot of purchasing was happening because rates were so low a couple years ago. And so there was help needed at the brokerage, and I was looking for an opportunity to fully go into this market. And at the time I was working for a nonprofit. It was a great experience, but very draining. If you've worked for a nonprofit, you totally understand this. The whole idea of working for a nonprofit and for them to function well is that the idea is that you work there, but you also donate your time as well. And it can be pretty tough. It can be pretty taxing. I'd work a lot of times 80 to 100-hour weeks, which I'm in no, disillusion that there aren't a lot of industries that work like that. But typically you get paid a little bit more than you would in nonprofits. So it's pretty taxing. And I found this opportunity to come in. I was going to be the processor, and I was working with my broker who I already knew for real estate. And it was kind of the perfect situation. And so we at the time were doing, typically averaging about 20 loans a month. Now, keep in mind that we are a small brokerage. We work, we are client based. We work on referrals. We work on building ties into our community and ties with our clients. It's extremely important that we do that. So it's not like if you worked for, let's say, maybe a Rocket Mortgage or a large international company where you would be pumping out maybe like 50 or 60 loans, something like super high volumes. because you kind of do that, right? Like 20 is pretty like a lot in this industry. Most loan officers are maybe doing a couple loans a month if they're lucky, if they're like, working. So we were doing quite a high volume. And because of that, I was able to really learn this industry. I think this is one of the things where I was lucky to set myself apart. Obviously, having these other aspects of real estate are very valuable, and being able to compete in the market, and as well as coaching my teams and things like that. But ultimately, being able to see so many applications up front or so many files up front made a big deal. It taught me how to essentially everything that you have to collect. And you learn this when you take your exam, but it's a lot more daunting when you first start to do it, right? I mean, you have to not only, like, let's say a bank statement, right? An asset statement, get that bank statement, but you have to learn how to audit it to know what is going to be, flagged when it goes to underwriting. It's not just a matter of being a good loan officer. It's not just collecting the documents, but foreseeing what's going to happen in underwriting so you can manage your time correctly. And that's what I was able to learn to do. And so when I first started, I was literally just collecting paperwork, right? Collecting the paperwork, letting my broker know that I had it, uploading it into creating like our backend system for storage and organization, and having that. I would have created an Excel sheet that would mark where everything was at. So he could literally just look at that and be like, okay, we have this, or we're waiting on these documents, or it's in underwriting, and this is exactly how long it's been in underwriting, and this is the last time the Mac would check on it, right? So I was very thorough in that way, because I felt that my job not only was to collect the documents, but to make it as easy as possible for my broker to know where we're at. Because what service am I if he doesn't know where we're at on a deal, especially when we're trying to close, 20 deals a month. And so, it kind of went like that for a really long time. And then I started to learn how to, so you're collecting the documents, everything gets submitted to underwriting. And then once everything gets submitted to underwriting, you go through that entire process and all the way up until when the file gets clear to close. And once it gets clear to close, that means all the conditions have been approved and now the file is ready to close. So I stopped at the clear to close. My broker took fully over from there. And he did all of the closing stuff and all of that. He also did all the stuff before that. So the next phase of me learning this career path was learning how to close. And so that's what I did. I learned how to do closing with my boss. I learned how to work with the title company, the escrow company, with the other realtors, sending over, like getting the signings scheduled, getting everything over to the county. And that was kind of the second phase of me learning this. And so obviously I was still kind of getting, learning the whole process of the underwriting and how to navigate it. And you have to keep in mind that there are like Fannie and Freddie Mac guidelines that have to be met. And the one thing that I really learned and that my broker taught me is that the underwriters are not always right. This is really tough when you're new. And I think this was really tough for my broker dealing with me, is that, he would ask me to make a call. I would make a call. They would tell me something, and then I would tell him, and he would be like, that's not right. Call them and tell them this. And then they would say something, and he would be like, no, they're wrong. And then he would have to call them and be like, look, this is the Franny and Freddie Mac guideline. You're not right. And you need to talk to somebody. And then they would talk to buddy. And you have to understand, you think that, oh, they're underwriters and they know what they're doing. A lot of the times they're like us, right? Especially as there was this big transition with bringing on new underwriters to deal with this overflow. They didn't always know exactly the right thing either. And there's ways to work around stuff. There's always gray areas in business like this. And there's ways, like a good example of a gray area is they have an upload system. That upload system, you have waiting time. So it might be 24 hours, could be 72 hours. But let's say that you upload everything. They needed one more document for you to get the clear to close. technically you could re-upload that document. They could make you wait the additional, you know, 24 hours to 72 hours, or they could have let you, or they could automatically like go in there right now, like upload it. Okay, boy, I got it. I'm going to put this to clear to close, right? That's the gray area. Another gray area is you could technically email them the document because they email you, but they like it to be uploaded in the system and they might make you duplicate that. But I mean, there's ways to work around this. And, as you get better underwriters, you start to understand this. So I was learning that, and I was learning this back end, the closing process, and I did that. And then after I learned that, I learned the first portion, which is the pre-approval process and how to create their files, how to send them applications, and how to get them into underwriting, and how to get their initial disclosures over. So this job really is 3 separate parts, and they all flow together, but that's the way that I learned them. And so learning how to do pre-approvals correctly, how to get those documents out, how to get it into the system and make sure that we're getting, they're approved eligible on these files, and, all of that sort of stuff. And so none of that is taught in taking the course. The course is it's essentially like if you were to take a law course. I mean, that's really the closest I can put to it. You don't learn a lot of the specific law names, but you learn the broad strokes of what those laws are. And, we're going to do another podcast on this at some point, but things have vastly changed from before 2008, right? Before 2008, anybody could get a loan. I mean, they were giving them away. It was not a big deal. People are qualifying, and now it's pretty tough to get a loan. There's a lot more restrictions in place, and that's part of what this exam is. All of these new rules that were put into place and the old rules that were in place to help consumers. And it has helped consumers in the way that it's created a space where you get less cheated and you are looked after, and it's harder to get put into bad products. But on the other side, it's made it that much more difficult for the consumer to make purchases. Right. And so it's this, double-edged sword, and people are trying to find a way to navigate. And I think that's, I think that's the unique thing about this career, is that this being, I think, a real estate person, in general, but specifically a loan officer, has become so much more important because it is so much more difficult to get a loan. It's not like before where I could easily understand why people be like, well, I don't really need you because I can get a loan. It's not that hard. But now it is really hard, and you do need somebody to help you navigate that market because the threshold to get into a home now is that much more difficult, especially here in California. So definitely something to consider. But, I learned all of that sort of stuff, and I still continue to learn it. But you have to learn how to do the job. And I learned that, hands-on, and I did that for, nearly 2 years until I got licensed, or, a year and a half, something like that. And so, I was doing that, and then I got licensed while I was doing that, because you don't have to be licensed to be a processor, because there's certain things that only the LO can do legally, and then there's other stuff that a processor can do. And like I said, it's mostly just like collecting documents. Like the broker or the LO has to go over your rates, and fees and all of that stuff, right? The stuff that like really matters. And so now that I know how to do both of all of it, the job, and I'm not saying that I'm the best, necessarily, like, not that I can like think of every strategy that's out there on how to get you into a home, but I'm pretty well versed. I've worked with a lot of, people that have their own business, and that's one of the hardest files to deal on is self-employed. I've dealt with a lot of self-employed. I've dealt with a lot of W-2. I've dealt with a lot of people that have overtime and bonuses and flexed hours and all of this stuff. And it's given me a lot of great experience. And it hasn't been so much that I haven't been able to continue to build the relationships and do the job the way that I want to do it. So that's been my experience in being in the market. And I've been able to coach another LO, new LO that came on, and that's been a very cool experience. But I'm still part of these groups, and that's why we're jumping back in to the Facebook group, the new loan officers group. And I just kind of wanted to go through here. It's really interesting to see some of the stuff that comes up because I sometimes forget how privileged I was to be able to fall into, the brokerage that I'm with and learn the things that I learned. And I like to look on here sometimes. Sometimes I'll answer, but you just never really know, right? So I'm going to go through a couple of these. I thought it might be interesting to some people to see what brand new loan officers are asking. There might be a small pause here and there, but bear with me. And if you like it, let me know. If not, then we'll do something else. So here's something really interesting. All right. So what is the typical pay for an unlicensed LOA or processor? So like I was saying, the position that I had now, I think that this is very experience based because if you're a brand new processor, like relatively brand new, you still need to work with that person pretty closely. But if you're someone like where I'm currently at, I can pretty much do it on my own. There might be one or two things that I still have to go to my broker for, but I'm a loan officer now, so I can do the whole thing on my own. If you're relatively brand new, it's going to be probably somewhere $250 to $300 a file. If you're established, maybe $500 to $600 a file. Don't expect to make more than that. That's pretty, like, it's here in California, at least about $500 a file. Now, when you look at it in the scheme of things, that's not a lot of money, right? The realtor could be making, $8 grand, $10 grand. I mean, even who knows if they have $1 million property, they could be making more than that. But the processing, like I said, you're pretty much collecting documents. So it really comes down to, and I do believe this, is what you get paid is in direct relation to the problems you solve. And so that may not feel nice to some people, but ultimately, I mean, that's the way the world works, right? That's why it's important to continue to build skill sets, to continue to learn and grow and take on coaching capacities and all of this sort of stuff. So, that's pretty typical. And if that is the case, this may not, if you're making $500 a file, if you figure that you're only closing, 2-3 loans a month, that's not a lot of money because that's before taxes. So, something to consider for those that are kind of out there considering that. But if you work with somebody that does a lot of, stuff like that and you have other ways to make money, it can be a pretty good side gig or whatever, but it can take up a ton of your time. 20 files a day or 20 files a month pretty much was, me working in the start of the morning. And we are in California and a lot of our companies are like in the Midwest. So it's about a 3-hour difference, 2 to 3 hour difference, depending on where they're at. And so because of that, we could start working technically here at like 7 or 8 a.m. And then they go after us as well. So we could technically work till like 5 or like 6 p.m. And because of that, we have a long day, right? Where we're kind of available. So something to consider. Loan officers, what are your top 3 tools / apps you would highly recommend? This is interesting. I'm wondering if they mean like a back-end CRM system or like ways to drive in business or something like that. Our brokerage has a program that we work with that's pretty good. It allows us to have them do the application. It allows us to upload document requests in there, as well as keep their file up to date. And it works on their platform is really nice. A lot of people, this is the interesting thing about technology is that although it does make things a lot easier, for some reason, a lot of people don't like to do it. They don't want to have to log into something and upload it there and continue to You have to go back and forth. A lot of the people we work with just want to send it in emails, right? Which is interesting because our platform is a secure system. And I think that's like one of the benefits, right? Is of having a secure system is being able to send your documents there you need to worry about. But a lot of people, they're perfectly fine with sending over stuff via email, which is fine, right? I mean, the likelihood of anything happening is really low, but it's a trade-off. So you could have the best system in the world and they might just want to send it via email. And I've even had somebody that's like, we're going to mail it. So that was a pretty tough one, but it happens. Thoughts on digital business cards, Moby, Tappy. My partner and I are considering making the transition and are curious to know who you all would recommend. I like the digital business cards personally. Like I said, I'm a marketing guy. So I think that this definitely helps, but I don't think you can have them solely alone. This is the reason why. If we are always to be marketing, right? When you have a digital business card, you can't leave them behind. So when there's opportunity to do that, right? And you could leave it, let's say you go to lunch, you leave your business card on the table. Let's say they're doing like a business card draft, you can put it in there. Wherever. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to leave your business card around, whether you agree with that sort of approach or not. It is, you buy these in bulks of 500 or 1,000, you got to get rid of them somehow. And so, that sort of thing. The other thing is, when you have a digital business card, however, you have to get someone's phone number, or if they have a tap, whatever it is, it can be a little convoluted. But I think the digital business cards, they're really nice. They're really aesthetic. They really stand out. It shows you're with the times. So I think, it's a trade-off for sure. But ultimately, I think the correct answer is you need to have both. I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to not have both if you want to be as competitive as you possibly can in this market. You need to do that. So something to consider. Hey guys, have any of you had any success in gaining business by emailing realtors or cold calling? The best thing to do? ? I am an assistant LO and starting to buckle down on building my own business, and I figured you all were the best to ask. TIA. So this is really interesting. I do this a little bit just because I think it would be fun to work with some other realtors. Now, there's a weird relationship, I think, between realtors and LOs, because the idea is that a realtor gives you business, right? So I don't know why, but it feels a lot of times like realtors feel like you have to give them business back in return for it to feel fair, right? But you have to remember that, like, yes, they're giving you business, but you are closing their file. Like, you're the reason their loan is their deal is going to close. And that's the service you're providing, right? And I think a lot of times it's like, it feels like it's a tit for tat sort of thing. And it's like, they feel like, well, if I give you this deal, then you need to bring me a deal. No, that's not really what's happening here, because you're not like, if I send you a deal and I'm not the LO, like, I don't get anything from that, right? When we work together and you're doing the deal, we are closing together. We're making money together. And so I think that needs to get expressed a lot more. Like, I don't have to send you business for us to have, both of us have a good relationship, right? Does it not matter to you that you work with a qualified loan officer, somebody that can get things closed when they say they can, that understands how underwriters work? Like, that's the thing that LOs need to do a better job of, and realtors need to do a better job of understanding. Now, as it pertains to, how do you prospect these people? I think there's no better way than really just reaching out to people face to face, because realtors, they are always reaching out to people, right? And they get inundated with that. And then they have people reaching out to them, and they're trying to use their time wisely. And like I said, there's, they don't maybe need a loan officer. Maybe they already partner with, some place. I'm sure their broker does. They already have that. And so, I think the best way you're going to win people over in this sort of thing is by meeting in person, and that can be difficult, but if you can email them and do things like that and get them to go to a lunch or something, then that's great. But ultimately, it's about educating them on what sort of value you bring. Like for myself, I'm working on mastering the 15-day close. My last deal I got it clear to close and ready to close in 14 days. So that's where I'm at now. Not everybody needs a 15-day close, but the fact that they know that I have that in my back pocket, that I have a way to do that, I think that's where I'm going to stand out in the market. So, definitely consider that, understand your value as a loan officer and be able to explain that to them. But also understand it can be really difficult to create those relationships with the brokers, especially with those realtors, especially like me, because I have realtors that I work with in our brokerage because we're partnered. They sometimes feel like, well, you're competing against us on that real estate side as well. And I go, that doesn't have to be like that, right? Like you need your deal closed. Your client needs a loan. Like, let me help you with that. So, all right. What's everyone's thought on a temporary buy down program? I think they're talking about possibly buying down points. Buying down, if you're not familiar with this, when you get quoted for a loan, we typically quote you at no cost. So that essentially means that the lender says, hey, this is all of their factors. And the factors lead us to say that they can get a 6% loan, because that's where the market's currently at, a 6% loan at zero cost, right? That's where we feel like they'll be able to do well on this. Now you can take, let's say, a 6.2 and they'll give you $3,000, or you can try to buy your rate down to a 5.8 and pay $5,000, right? So I think that's what they're talking about. It's hard to say just jumping into it without a context, but a buy down program like that where you can buy stuff down, I think is sometimes necessary for people. So definitely interesting. So I think that's about all I want to do today. I just thought it would be kind of cool to go on here and see what people are asking about. A lot of what's on this page is just like people literally asking about scenarios, which I think is really interesting because you have a broker, you're supposed to have a team lead, you're supposed to have somebody. Like, why are you spending your time posting on an open Facebook group when you should be able to go directly to somebody to do that? And I see this a lot, like, hey, I have this scenario, I don't know what to do. Like, what do you guys recommend? And maybe I'm just lucky because my broker, he, at least so far, has always known what to do. But maybe that they just are not getting the help that they need or whatever it is. But ultimately, like for me, I go directly to my broker and I get help that way. And maybe I'm privileged in that way and I'm lucky and I'm happy about that. But that's what I see a lot on these pages, even the real estate pages. It's really a lot of like, hey, help me with this scenario. I don't know what to do. And almost, most times I have, I feel pretty confident about how I would move forward with that. But also keep in mind that it's Facebook. So some stuff is different state to state. And obviously like the property prices are different and all that stuff, contributes. So I don't know if I can answer all of it, but I find for the most part, I do find myself wondering, like, don't you have somebody that you should probably be just calling and getting this figured out sooner than seeing what 100 people's, and they're not always helpful on there. If you have never been on a Facebook group page, all the comments aren't always super helpful and things like that. But so a little bit of insight into kind of this world of brand new LOs and my experiences being an LO. I love to dive into this more at some point, but I thought for today it would be nice just to get on. I was feeling, a little motivated. I'm feeling inspired after our business meeting, and I wanted to make sure we got this out and just kind of gave you a little bit of insight. So as always, this is the Hard Money Show where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. Thank you guys for being on. You guys have a great weekend.